Okay. All right. I'd like to welcome everybody to this month's, the January edition of the newsletter, which is a January-February edition. And what we're doing here for this segment and most of the newsletter is we're going to take a look at a very special person that taught here for many years and passed away last year, and was her service was here at the new auditorium. I believe it was like around January 20th last year, and we're talking about obviously Nancy Peterson. And what we've got here is we've assembled a group of special forces teachers and administrators here that worked with Nancy P, and they're going to share some of their stories and memories of her as they from when they worked with her and what she meant to this school. So I'm going to step out of the way here, and our first person to talk will be Barb Peterson, who will be our newest retiree here, and she worked many years with Nancy, and she'll be the first one to go. So here you go.
Okay, Barb Peterson, and I still remember the first day that I ever saw Nancy, I ever met Nancy. I walked into her classroom, and she was sitting behind her desk that was in the same position that it was in the new building when she left us, and because I had seen her picture in the Ames Tribune that she had been the social studies teacher of the year, and I said, "Oh, I think I know you." And she was just very kind and very polite, and little did I know that that was a friendship that would develop over what, 25 years maybe. Anyway, yeah. And so that was the very beginning. I could still walk in, and she was sitting behind the desk. She probably had a Tootsie Roll pop in her mouth. That's what she would always do when she was checking papers. She'd always have a Tootsie Roll pop in her mouth. So.
Barb? Okay.
Okay. Well, who wants to go ahead? Introduce yourself.
Okay. Cindy Dooland. I've known Nancy for at least that long. It's hard to say just one thing. She was just such a special person and a special teacher.
Remember the time we sang a trio together?
Yes.
It was
a homecoming thing.
Yeah, it was a homecoming, like a talent show or something.
Yes.
And the three of us sang
The Rose.
The Rose. And Nancy had the most beautiful voice.
And she played the guitar.
She played the guitar very well too, but her voice was just so light and airy, and she had a beautiful, beautiful tone to her voice.
And she was just one of those people that always followed through with what she said. Let's do this or let's do that. And she would organize it, and she would follow through with it. She just amazed me. Yeah. The time she spent, and the time she spent thinking about what's the next thing that she can do to help her kids learn something new and something that will stay with them the rest of their lives.
I got to pull in something about her singing, because Joel Krukenberg and I were singing at the Fox Lounge with her.
Oh.
And she got up on the stage and sang Delilah with us. So that's been a few years ago.
We won't ask about the situation. That was a professional development.
That's what we used to go after
Jack,
conferences.
go ahead and introduce yourself and continue on a little bit.
Were you all done, Cindy?
Yeah.
Okay. For now.
I'm Jack Kelly, and Nancy and I team taught social studies in 1984. We came here. She and I came the same time along with Q, and Nancy had seniority on me because she signed her paper, I think, her contract an hour before I did.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
So that was it. But she was a lot of fun. I have some other stories about her, because you guys are going to say all the nice things. I'm going to tell you some of the
Well, I
harder
have
things.
one question. The Fox Lounge, was that our Christmas?
That was a Christmas party.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was Julie happy there?
I'm sure she was.
Yes.
I don't know if she was happy or not.
Oh, okay.
She was probably.
Okay.
I'm John Kinley, and I was superintendent here in Gilbert from 2005 to 2011, and had a chance to work with Nancy. And the thing that struck me about Nancy was her commitment to helping kids get excited about history, and her commitment to the community with the Gilbert Historical Society and all the things that they were trying to do, the community activities that have continued on over the years to draw people in, whether it's the events that took place out at Gene Upstill's farm, or the play that was over at Grace Church, or whatever it might be, but a lot of historical things, and bringing the kids into that and having them involved using technology to record all those things or participate. you know, she had a boundless energy when it came to those types of things, so.
But she was a true Iowan too, wasn't she? I mean, I remember the Iowa State Fair was one of the times I saw her most in the summer with her family. So she was very family oriented.
She showed her
Her
pigs.
pigs, yeah, and her whole family was into that. And I remember also, if you want to pick someone that wasn't Gilbert by birth but by choice, I mean, she certainly was that. You know, she really made this her school and her community. I'm John Davis, I'm the ag teacher, and I was a pretty young teacher when I came in. A couple years, it thought I knew the world, you know, when I came in. But Nancy said I was going to be an ag teacher, and my professor told me, isn't there something else you might want to do? But I always remember her brother was an ag teacher, says, do you know Ole? I said, I know Lena and Sven too, and that was kind of a long-running joke, but we won't share all of it right now.
No, if you get started, we don't finish.
Yeah, but
Next thing we know, we'll be at the Fox Lab.
yeah, exactly. But she was, you know, and it's good to be around, you know, the folks that I spent most of my time in the district with around this table. But I just remember Nancy was always kind of like a sister. I remember you could go down and you could have a little bit of disagreement, but it was never personal, and it was always right back, and you'd help one another. And one of those that you always saw smiling coming down the hall at you, and you always smiled or knocked on the door when you went by. But yeah, great memories.
And she was history through and through. If you brought up any topic at the lunch table, she would say, well, now, you know the history of that.
Cliff
It's
Clayton.
because
Any treats that you brought, the president so-and-so used to grow this in his blood. Yeah, it was.
But it wasn't always easy for Nancy either. When she first come here, she had some problems with the older kids and so on, and Q would call me in and said, can you take these class so that she could have the younger kids and so on, but she was bound determined to win it over, and she did.
She worked really hard at becoming a better teacher every single year. Every single year.
But the most important part was that she knew that she had some shortcomings, and she had absolutely no problem saying, this is a problem that I have, who can help me? You know, it was not like, well, I'm going to try to hide this. And no, she was trying to better herself, ask for advice, cry a little, put him in the doghouse.
I have a class that I've taught at Iowa State to undergraduates, and I've had teachers come and talking, you know, Becky, I think you've been there, Marcy, I don't know if I ever had you come or not to speak to my students. Yeah, anyway, but I had Nancy come and talk about being a social studies teacher. And I had a pretty large group of social studies majors in the class. And she started out with giving the litany of, well, I started out in this school, but then after a semester I went, that didn't work out. So, and she went through this, because she went through several different schools before she could figure out what she really wanted. 7 schools.
7, wasn't it 7?
Yes.
Anyway, and by the time she got to the point where, and then I got a teaching job at Gilbert, and everybody's going, holy cow! Is this what we have to look forward to? Anyway, but she never hid that. You know, that she struggled to find where her niche was, but when she found it, then, like you said, she worked so hard to be the very best teacher she could be.
Well, we all knew that story of, I'm Marcy Good. I used to teach English in the old high school when it was junior, senior high school. We all know the story of Nancy going through the 7 different colleges and trying to find her niche, and now at this point it's so hard to believe that, because she just seemed like she was born to teach, and to teach history and social studies. And somebody mentioned something earlier about her finding a way for students to learn so that it would stay with them. And I still remember her when we had the junior high kids, that the day before Christmas she would show up in her Norwegian costume, and she would bring wheat, and the kids would spend the day weaving whatever that you make that's a Norwegian tradition. Or she would have kids out in the hallway if she had a world history class, and they would have these things that they were putting up on the wall about the Renaissance. Or she had kids going around the building because they were doing a murder trial, and they were gathering evidence, and they were getting ready for the trial, or they might be getting ready for a debate. And if it was election day, she would come
with her. I have voted sign
She would take all the
on.
kids,
Oh,
all these
yes.
seniors.
Yeah.
And
Anybody that could vote had to march down to the school.
there are still
the
kids
church.
today that will vote, and I know that every time they vote for the rest of their lives, they will remember it was because Mrs. Peterson taught them how important it was to do that.
Yeah.
So I know that all of her lessons have continued on with a lot of these kids.
She was a
because
little bit to the left too.
Oh, yeah.
some of them didn't know that though. She was very
She
careful
was.
about not letting the kids know what way that
Yes,
she
that's
leaned.
And she was, we'd ask her, how do you do that? How can, when you have a strong opinion, and she did, about some things, she was very good at that, and not to let them be, what's the word?
Influencer.
Yes,
Or
influenced
them.
by her opinion.
I loved lunch hours when you'd get she and Bob Jensen. But just, you know, you'd ask them, well, what do you think about this? You know, and whatever is going on in the world at that time. And oh, Bob would get real about something, and Nancy would be a little smoother, you know. And she would always say, I mean, yeah, she was left-leaning, but if something was not fitting into that way of thinking, she could see it. And I always had trouble with that, because I'm a little left-feeling, and I'm bound to determine left, but she could always kind of see the other way, if there was any legitimacy to it, so.
But she would have debates
Oh, yeah.
in class, and she had to be that way. She,
Yes.
I don't know whether she taught herself to be that way, or whether she was always one who could see both sides of it. But
She was really sneaky sometimes about her teaching, because there might be something going on in the background in the school district, and she would teach a lesson on civil disobedience. And pretty soon we had kids who were walking out of the school in support of Joe Lunan.
Oh, yes.
And they would take what they learned in the classroom and they would put it to some practical use, and she knew exactly what was going to happen.
Gosh,
But
you remember that day?
yes.
Oh, man. Well, you weren't here, Mrs. Kinnaman.
And didn't want to be.
Just guessing that maybe that's true.
Oh,
They
we
all
all
got
thought
up
it
and
was
just
great.
marched out of our classes, and of course, all the teachers just let them march, and, you know, they went along, stood along,
We just
the
were
road out in
sitting
front
there
of
going,
the school.
go for it, go for it.
Yeah.
Do
She
it.
said, I didn't tell him to do it.
Yes.
She was tough to substitute for, though.
Oh, I got a story about that
love it.
too.
When
I
I
love
would
it.
come in and substitute for her, you either had to wear some stupid thing over your head, or run a whole bunch of machines, you know, to get through
one of my stories.
one sentence, or I could have done it, but we had to punch this button, record
Diddly.
this, play the music, and so on. And if you looked for a pin, you never could find one because there was an ear of corn in there. You know, that desk was full of stuff
love
in
it.
the corner.
I'm Alicia Van Bergen, and we were soulmates in that respect, because my room was a disaster all the time. I taught Spanish here for 25 years. And I think that we were the only two teachers in this whole school that our rooms were always in progress of making something.
Oh, yeah.
Or you were stuck to a chair with glue because you were
Yeah.
making a piñata.
Piñatas.
Or we were making a cemetery in the middle of the room. And my desk was a total disaster, but nobody could touch it because I knew exactly where things were. I walked into Nancy's room and it was heaven. It was the same thing. The place was just, but you knew the kids were active.
Oh, yeah.
Well, some of us had to substitute for her when she would go for treatments. And I had a world history class one day, and I was just like, you go in there, and she's got the TV set up, and you're supposed to show just this brief section of this DVD. And she's got the computer set up, and she's got one of her diddlies on there that you're supposed to show at a certain time. And there are cords coming down from the ceiling, and there are cords everywhere, and there are multiple remotes. And I looked at the kid that was sitting right in front of all of this equipment. I said, do you have any idea how to run all of this? And She said, well, I can try. And it was probably the most disastrous class they had ever had.
And she had a screen from 1954.
Yeah.
Well, and everything made sense to her. She, in all that chaos, she knew where
She knew
everything,
what everything was.
Yes. But in all of that chaos, one thing I always noticed when I walked into her room is if some kid was having a birthday, their name was on the board.
Yeah.
So she was well organized.
And the student of the
The
week.
history, whatever happened in history that day was always up on the board out in the commons.
She always
Her
had the
assignment.
student of the week that she never missed.
And the assignment,
The little notes that she used to send home when they did something good.
Yes.
My kids still have them. All three of them
My
have
daughter.
them in their folders. They're probably the only ones that they got a good report from. Poor Fred and John especially. Definitely not math. It was-
Jack, were you a social studies pack rat? Did you keep a lot of stuff?
Not like she did, no.
He's kind of neat.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, I kept a ton of stuff as a social studies teacher. And, but I was pretty good at weeding it out over a period of time and getting rid of some of the really old stuff. But Nancy kept everything. And I know this, and she wasn't very happy with me, but the custodians came to me, and it was right at the end of the school year. And they said, what are you going to do about Nancy's room? I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, we can't clean it, you know, because she's got stuff everywhere. We can't clean it. And so I went down and I opened up the closet, you know, because she had stuff all over the room. Well, I opened up the closet, well, it almost all fell out on me. Anyway, so I had to visit with her. I said, Nancy, you have to get some of this out of here. You have to sort through and decide what you're going to keep, what you're going to throw. And oh, I know that she is agonized over that. And I think what she ended up doing was taking, she took a lot of stuff home. You know, she took a lot of things home that she would keep there. Well, they're going to replace the carpet and things like that. And it was that summer that we had all that work done with the air conditioning system, and then they were going to change out the carpet, and they were going to paint and so on. And all that stuff had to go someplace. And it was really hard for her because it was hard to part with all that because it was all history to her. It was all important.
And she taught us such a lesson when she was sick, how she handled it.
Courage. What
I can't
courage.
talk about it.
She had
For me,
such
it's very
courage.
hard because she was my rock.
yeah.
She was my rock.
I never saw anybody so disciplined because she read about your diet making a difference, and she would sit there and she would eat a casserole that had brown rice in it, and she would
Banana.
drink warm water.
Yeah, she never
Yes.
liked coffee, so
Warm
she drank hot water.
She drank hot water.
Remember her cup, I always wanted to take it and wash it.
So Gilbert schools
Yes,
are
yes,
class
the
act.
warm water.
Yeah.
You
Every
never
day.
saw her down. She never
No.
gave up. She never let the kids know how bad she might be feeling. She didn't stay home and feel sorry for herself.
Scheduled her appointments.
Yes,
when
that's
Yes.
the end of the day.
She
Yes.
scheduled her
And-
funeral so that it wouldn't
Yes.
interfere with a school day.
Because when Jack said she was bound and determined, that's the way she approached the cancer too. She was bound and determined.
Well, she was pretty
Well,
darn successful
Oh,
for
yeah.
17 years.
Oh my gosh.
We spent many afternoons or at her house or at my house that we were both feeling kind of down. And cheering each other up, and we always ended up with a bottle of wine. It was just, okay, let's forget it, let's just have a glass of wine, you know. And
It's the sorority
but
you
she
don't want to
always
be in.
tried to,
Yes.
you know, perk you up and
She and Dr.
Right.
Guffey, you know, he was her,
Oh, yes.
Dr. Guffey
see, and
was
I
her
tried to
physician.
get her to go and see
Oh, that's right, the guy in New York
Yes,
City.
the guy in New
Remember
York.
that? Yeah,
Nashia Boomerad, and she would not. She wanted to stick.
She
was
was
a
loyal
lawyer.
for a long time.
She was very loyal, and she felt that they were doing exactly the right thing.
And she had
Yeah.
a lot of say, she was able to speak up and knew exactly what was going on with her and made decisions about what was going to go in the
Yes.
future, what was gonna happen. She was very, very brave.
I was supposed to go to her house, I think, the day that she died, because I'd gotten a call, you know, and said, scheduled me for that day, now I'm sure
Yeah.
that that was all gonna change, you know.
Yes.
Great.
But I found out about her death in the Miami airport, which we were just getting ready to fly back, and there was a couple of Gilbert students in there, and they hadn't heard about it, you know, so it was just kind of
We were
ironic.
in Orlando, and I
Yeah.
had gone online and found out.
Yeah.
Jen Schnormeyer called me, and
How did she?
as soon as I heard her voice, I knew what she was gonna say, and I said, Jen, I'm sorry you had to tell me this, because I could tell she was just heartbroken too.
I was walking down the hall, and Kathy Anderson met me, and she said, let's kind of go for a little walk here. She put her arm around me, and we turned the corner by Nancy's room there, and so I went in and had a nice quiet moment in her room for a while. And I took one of her books, and I still got it at home, one of her trivia books. It's a great book, so, but it still has some bookmarks in it that she used with the kids. So.
Well, Danny, you talked about Gilbert, the Gilbert way, and Gilbert isn't just your co-workers, and they're not just your friends. This is a family kind of place. So we all took this very personally.
You know, and she was, I look back and it's, every one of you has that common thread, and she was the epitome of that, and role models for younger teachers coming in. 'Cause I am kind of the younger one in this group, you know, and I just remember being very observant. Drove the bus, coached, was the one that would do lunch duty, study hall, was a teacher association leader. You know, she did the full package. When she went into the profession, she was, you know, she would go to rallies down in Des Moines and do stuff. You know, to promote the profession of teaching. So, you know, it was a complete package. And she ran her own history club. You know, it was something she did locally, and she would do the things that was not just a 7:45 to 3:45. I mean, she really did everything. But that was, you know, that was just the expectation that everybody in Gilbert had of everybody else, and that's just, you did the job, you know.
But this community would not be the same without her. She is the force behind the Historical Society.
Absolutely.
She is the force behind having that parade before homecoming.
Yeah.
She was the force having the farm day in the summer. When they went to Centerville to do the diggings.
When they went, oh, yeah.
Zenersville.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
All the things would not have, I mean, those are community things, that they are very, extremely important.
And her parents got involved too.
Yes.
I mean, her mom and dad always came when they would go on field trips, well, out to Zenersville. They would go there with them, and
Yeah,
I
I
always
never met her.
was impressed.
The parents or anything, but they knew who I was just because of
Yeah.
probably some stories she told them.
She used to take students to their farm, to her parents' farm, for a farm day.
She had history club kids at her house a lot,
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
a lot of times. And
Tell who you are.
I'm Bob Jensen. I'm the oldest living graduate of Gilbert High. A slight exaggeration, but not too far.
But he's not the oldest in the room.
I got to know Nancy as a substitute teacher right after she had her first cancer treatment. And I was walking down the hallway, and I saw this woman in the hallway dressed in 1900s garb, and she was going to make a presentation to her class using a little bit of theatrical work. And I was duly impressed at the very first time that I ever met her. And we subsequently became colleagues, and she was just an absolute wonderful person. There's just no question about it. She did more with less real strong intellectual ability than anybody that I've ever seen. And I don't mean that to be critical whatsoever. I mean, she was just dynamic in her enthusiasm. And it was contagious.
She couldn't spell her way
Oh,
out.
no,
And her sentence construction
The
was
kids loved it. The
left
kids loved it. They thought,
it was
because
not,
it was her true self.
Yeah.
She did not hide
it
any
wasn't
of these
important to her.
things.
Yeah.
No, and
It
that
wasn't important.
it endeared the kids to her because she could admit it and ask
Yeah.
for their.
And how many kids sitting right there could not spell either?
Yeah.
And if it wouldn't be for a spell check, they wouldn't have a clue how to spell.
And as a special ed teacher, I had the privilege of sitting in on her classroom many, many times.
As did I.
And this is one Nancy that we all knew and loved, but when you walked into her classroom, her posture changed. She was calm and cool. She went from one diddly to the next little computer thing to the next.